welcome you to the annual meeting, annual business meeting of the membership. And one of the ways that this meeting is different from all the many other meetings that we have is that this meeting is specifically called out in the bylaws to be the meeting of the membership, and any member is welcome to come. We typically have this meeting at WEF Tech, or as it's referred to in the bylaws, the annual meeting, but it's not a requirement. And so I think we've found that by meeting online, that gives an opportunity for everyone to attend. There are certainly benefits to that. And I'm glad that you are all here with us. I just want to kind of start by saying what a pleasure it's been over this past year to work with Nikita, as well as the delegates as a whole, as we've tackled a number of different things this year. And early in Nikita's leadership, she invited me in to work with her on establishing your all's priorities, as well as making appointments to the various WEF board committees. And I think pretty much every WEF board committee has delegates on it. And I think that those the work of those committees and the experiences and the outputs are richer because of the delegates' interaction there. And as you probably know, the speaker this year, Nikita, attends the WEF board meetings and participates in them. And I just want to say thank you to Nikita for her engagement this year and her participation. Her reflections definitely enriched our conversations, and I think made our outcomes better as a result. So thank you, Nikita. It's no small amount of work to add to the workload of being the speaker. Really appreciate that. And I certainly want to also thank those of you who have been served on those WEF board committees, whether it's the nominating committee, the finance committee, the strategic advisory committee, WEF Tech advisory committee, diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittee, you name it, everything. And I know there are others. Everything's has delegates on that committee, those committees, and we really appreciate that. Today's agenda is pretty straightforward. Our goals are to provide a high-level overview on board activities and volunteer accomplishments from the past year, deliver a financial update on how the organization is doing and its projections into the future, as well as to understand WEF's priorities for the months ahead. So let's get started. And I was asked to speak about the state of the Federation. So Kelsey, if you could share the slides now, that would be great. Yeah. So anyways, here we are at the WEF business meeting. So if we could advance to the next slide. I can sum up pretty simply. WEF's future is bright. I hope you guys all have sunglasses nearby, because you're going to need them for the year ahead. And we could leave it there, but I think there's an expectation that maybe we drill into a little bit more detail than that. In a few minutes, you're going to hear from Keith Hobson. Keith, I see you there, our WEF's treasurer. And here, as you're going to see from Keith's presentation, WEF's financial position is very strong. We have weathered this pandemic very well. There probably will be some bumps in the year ahead, but we have the reserves to be the shock absorbers on that trip. And that's thanks to years of work and professionalism, both on the staff and volunteers' parts. Following Keith, WEF's Executive Director, Walt Marlowe, will give you an overview of activities more from a programmatic level. And I'll just say in advance, there's so much going on at WEF, especially from a staff level, that he can't possibly tell you everything, but we'll look forward to seeing what he's able to squeeze in there. And then later during the HOD meeting, the second HOD meeting, the one that's focused on the year to come, President-elect Jamie Eichenberger is going to drill in a bit more on the work of the strategic plan that's going to be a big part of this year to come. Next slide. But before I reflect on kind of what the board accomplishments have been over this past year, I want to I share this slide sort of in jest, but one of the things that I have learned over the year is that WEF is very much like this proverbial elephant being felt by all these blindfolded people. WEF is, we are the people that know WEF as well as anybody. Of our members, we're the ones that put in the most effort. So in theory, we should know WEF the best, and yet none of us really knows WEF. We each know pieces of it based on our experience and the parts of WEF that we've interacted with. So whether one is a delegate, you bring a certain perspective to the table that way. People who are active in our technical committees have a slightly different experience and perspective on WEF. Certainly, like a utility leader might view WEF even more differently. They're looking for maybe networking opportunities to bring resources to their staff. Exhibitors have yet a different experience in terms of what they're looking for and what they bring to the table. Certainly young professionals, and then we have to add in there WEF staff. They have a very different perspective of the organization, see it entirely differently, and they live and breathe it in a different way than probably most of us. Then I also think about our partners on the outside. They're looking for something different with WEF. They have a different set of experiences. And these and many more all together, they're all true, they're all real, and together they make up this animal that we know and love as WEF. But however much time we put into it, we will never truly know the entire thing. And I think that's important for us to kind of keep in perspective as we work with each other, and certainly as we work into this strategic plan and try to envision WEF's future. But anyway, you sort of get that picture that none of us knows the organization perfectly. And so next slide, please. And then there's the board. And this is this year's board. This is a picture taken from the rooftop of the Fauché Tower in Minneapolis, where we were finally able to meet in person at the end of July. And it was a really nice opportunity to get this board together for the first time. And the board is made up of 11 volunteers and the executive director. And each of us brings our own perspective. None of us knows the organization fully, but the goal is that collectively we are getting to as full a perspective of WEF as is practical. And it is our job to collectively kind of bring our experiences, yet set them aside when it comes to decision making, and try to think in what is best for the organization. And that can be hard at times. And I can honestly say that each board member works, well, first of all, they work really hard. I mean, what they bring to the table, the preparedness, the work that they put in between meetings, their committee meetings, and interacting with lots of other pieces of WEF is really humbling. Trust me when I say that this is a group of people that knows how to speak their minds, but also knows how to listen and how to come to consensus, even on some really, really difficult issues. And that it's those difficult and challenging moments that really speak to who they are, who we are together. And I've been so honored to have this opportunity to work with each and every one of them. But we have to remember that as much as we, the board, and then I include all volunteers really in this, that as much as we love WEF, as much as we put our effort, as much effort as we put into it, Walt runs the organization. And so next slide. And we have, this is sort of a generalized organizational chart of the staff. And on any given week, there's somewhere between like 90 and 100 staff. Obviously, it bumps up and down depending on who's coming and going. And I'll point out that there's only one of those staff members that reports to the board. Everybody else feeds up through Walt. And so even though, and this can get a little confusing for any of us volunteers, we work closely with staff. They are oftentimes our colleagues on technical committees. Sometimes they are supporting a committee that we work on. We may have a business relationship with them with a company that exhibits at WEF Tech or something like that. But those, we are not their supervisors then, and we have to be really careful about how that relationship works. I think that's something that the board in recent years has made some good evolution on, and hopefully I can say that about volunteers as a whole. And so while there isn't a bright line between what staff do and what volunteers and volunteer board members do, yet we're going to try to divide up the reporting out between, I'm going to share with you some things that from a volunteer perspective and from a board member's perspective that we've been working on this past year, and Walt's going to kind of do something similar but from a staff perspective. So next slide. There. And so here are just some highlights from my perspective of what the board has been working on over this past year. And the first and foremost is this new strategic planning process. And this was really kind of the top priority of the board going into, at least for new things, going into the this fiscal year. And we decided, our first meeting really in, I guess it would have been in November of last year, this trying to launch a new strategic planning process rose to the top. And then in the subsequent months, we continued to evaluate that and dig into it a little bit, and made the decision that this was really a time to go big or go home. And this was not a time for us to make incremental changes in our current strategic plan, which has served us well for roughly a decade. The world is changing. WEF is changing, WEF's membership is changing, and we want it to continue to change. We'll get into our next piece there. And so we need a strategic plan that can really help us stay ahead of all those changes and be the thriving, vibrant organization that we all want it to be, even though we may see it from a different perspective and have slightly different ideas about what that means. But that's where the magic happens with the strategic plan. So anyways, Jamie's going to go into some more specifics about that in his later presentation, but that has certainly, I would say, been the highlight of one of the key outcomes from this past year. Another one I certainly want to highlight is the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, building on previous year's work. This year was the first year that the board had a subcommittee of the governance committee, but it really functioned in a pretty standalone way, made up of a wide swath of WEF members, including some board members, working closely with the Silverine Group, our very able consultant in this process. And I've been so pleased with the outcomes of this work that is not only made good progress and made an impact this year, but the strategy that they've laid out for the years ahead is really putting us, I think, in very good stead for continued evolution and progress in this area. One of the priorities that I made as board president was, as we were setting up our task forces and committees for the year, to do our best to make sure that those committees were themselves reflective of the diversity that we want to see in the organization moving forward. And I think that we can do a lot better in years to come, but each year we need to build on that work. So anyways, I've been very, very thankful, and Donnell Duncan, one of the co-chairs, is here with us today. And Donnell, thank you to you and to everybody on that committee for the work that you've done. Something sort of an outgrowth from that DEI work is the establishment of a code of conduct and a sort of parallel non-harassment policy that feeds into that code of conduct. this is something, it's one of those things like an emergency room. We hope that we never need to use it, but it's there for us, and it's comforting to know that it's there and that there's some policies to go along with that. And one of the nice things coming out of this, both the DEI work and the code of conduct, is that we're seeing that many of our MAs are starting to look to that work for how they can incorporate it into their own policies and activities. I think that's wonderful. Another thing that this year has certainly required, but it was something that we were on track to do anyway, is reimagining WEF Tech. Last year, of course, was fully virtual. That's the way it had to happen because none of us could meet in person. But as we looked forward, only even stepping back from that, before the pandemic happened, we already knew that we needed WEF Tech to evolve. And we had been laying the groundwork. We were changing the role of the WEF Tech Advisory Committee. We were getting outside expertise on some of the trends in the meeting industry. And then this past year, in a newly configured, and I think very exciting WEF Tech Advisory Committee that really kind of put new energy into it under the leadership of Matt Winkleman. They really did yeoman's work in terms of trying to gather input from so many different stakeholders that are involved in WEF Tech and start thinking about how we can evolve that event so that it continues to provide the wonderful programming and the wonderful exhibit opportunities and interaction with exhibitors that we've come to know and love, but also provide a more intentional set of opportunities for really connecting with fellow attendees. And so you'll see in this year's WEF Tech some opportunities that kind of riff off of some of the things that we did in the WEF Tech Connect last year. These learning exchanges, roundtable events, focus groups, meetups, all these kinds of things to really try to enhance that attendee experience so they can take away new engagements and new relationships that it really would be hard to replicate online. Now, the other two parts of WEF Tech, this kind of reimagined WEF Tech we're experimenting with, in addition to WEF Tech the way we've known and love it, but with these kind of new interaction opportunities, there will be a WEF Tech Live. It's sort of like a highlights channel that's going on at the same time that anybody can attend, whether they're registered for WEF Tech but are back in their hotel room between things, or whether they weren't able to travel to WEF Tech at all. And then the third piece of the WEF Tech will be in the middle of November, WEF Tech Online, and that is an opportunity for either for people who didn't come to WEF Tech and they want to register to still be able to get a lot of that programming, as well as some of the online learning exchanges and interactive conversations that we will have at WEF Tech, in-person WEF Tech. It's also an opportunity for those of us that come to WEF Tech in Chicago to be able to go back and see some of the programming that we couldn't get to, because I don't know about you, but I can never get to very many sessions, certainly not the number that I want to. So this will be an opportunity that I'm looking forward to be able to go back and get some of that I missed when I was there in person. And then along with this sort of reimagining WEF Tech, the push to year-round programming. And what I mean by this is, of course, we've always had our specialty conferences around the year. But what I'm really thinking about is our now packaging things online through the Learning Center that allows people to access some of our programming no matter where they are, no matter when they are, and they can get modules that are aligned with some of the things that they need. And so I'm excited about how that will continue to grow over the coming years. A few other things I just want to highlight. Certainly the member engagement transformation effort. This is a critical thing that's been going on for a few years and has picked up momentum this year. It's imperative that we find ways to onboard members, to help them engage in small ways and large ways, and in ways that allow for kind of more organic interaction and more organic, allow them to, when new ideas come about. Small Communities Task Force, that came out of the HOD, when I think we called it a roundtable last, thank you, Nikita, last January. And that committee, that task force continues to work, and we'll be bringing recommendations to the board shortly, probably later this fall. And that has a number of HOD members on it, and clearly touched, I don't want to say touched a nerve, but touched some sort of an energetic line that was going through, but hadn't quite been grounded. There's clearly a lot of interest there. We just need to get these recommendations to the board and see how that would carry forward with that. The board made some very definite recommendations regarding programmatic investments, both in terms of things to emphasize and put new investment in, and things to stop doing. The biosolids, the board allocated new, allocated resources to the biosolids. We hiring 2 biosolids people, a director and a second person in that program, and we're seeing great things come out of that. And then also supported Walt in the strategic decision to sell the National Green Infrastructure Certification Program, with this sort of decision that, okay, so we tried certification, but that's, green infrastructure is really important to us, but certification isn't our bag. And we were able to hand it off to a better home, if you will, and meanwhile solidifying WEF's bottom line in doing that. And I think that's a pretty significant thing. And then finally, in the sort of more like housekeeping things, there's a lot of things that the board has to do in terms of housekeeping. And I would say that this year we have been able to become a bit more systematic in our self-reflection, and both in terms of how the board is working, but also in terms of our primary role in overseeing the executive director. We've had a policy in place for some years, and that it's been taken a while to kind of get it into our muscle memory for how we evaluate an executive director, partly, and that's partly because as we changed executive directors, just as we were starting to land this new policy, but I think that makes for a stronger organization overall when we have a healthy way of doing that. And then finally, hiring new legal counsel. We had the same legal counsel forever and ever and ever, and with Walt's leadership and the board's support, we made it a priority to find new legal counsel this year, and I think we are really happy with who we've hired. So with that, those are a couple of the highlights that kind of zoom through. And with that, I want to, Kelsey, you can take those slides down, and let's hand it over to Keith for a financial update.
Yeah, thanks, Lan. That was very informative. It's interesting to see kind of where we've been through the year. And as we kind of pull back the curtain, one of the things that Nikita and Stephen asked me to do was maybe not concentrate so much on this past year, but where we're going next year. And, you know, I've got Penny and Karen listed here because I just want to emphasize the importance that WEF staff really has in our finances as well. We really operate as a team. They're in kind of constant communication with me and other board members, and especially our finance committee. And I think that's really been beneficial to us, especially over this last year and a half or so with everything that's been going on. So really appreciate their work. Next slide, Kelsey. So even though this is maybe about money, it's really also about the programs, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. you can go ahead and list the other items here, Kelsey. Yeah, thank you. So just to kind of highlight a couple things from this past year, back in February, we had an online meeting with your HOD Finance Committee or Budget Committee, with the CLC leadership, and with our WEF Finance Committee, to really go over the budget from last year, the process that we were doing, and kind of take a look to make sure that we're online and in parallel with our current strategic plan. And that was a really good effort. I especially want to thank you, or two HOD members that have served on the Finance Committee this year, Brian Shannon from Alabama and Tom Galazinski from Arizona. Tom, I'm getting closer on your last name. Hopefully in another year here, I'll have that pronunciation down, but really appreciate their effort. It's really important that we get the delegates' input, not only on the budget, but the finances that we've got going, and so that we can get that keep that communication open. A couple things that really we've been financing this AMS program through Fontiva, who is our consultant, for a number of years now, and that was finally launched this year. We had a kind of a rough start from the MA portal side of things. As you might know, we ended up having to pull that out and turning that back to them and having them redesign and reprogram some of that. But then here in mid-February, that was relaunched again for the MA portal. So we're happy that that's out there. Please get us any feedback on that, because it should be an important tool for the MAs, and we're pleased that we have that now, and it should be a great communication tool. As Lynn mentioned, we've had a lot going on in the DE&I effort over the last several years, especially in the member and staff area. We'd like to push that out more into the MA area going forward, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. Lynn mentioned we approved some additional staffing throughout the year, and we actually had some pretty significant savings through the sale of the NGICP program that she mentioned. So that was great. Another thing that staff has really been tuned in on is some of the benefits that we can get. We applied and received a PPP loan both in the last 2 years, and our first loan was forgiven this past year, and so that's on the books. We're also looking at an employee retention credit that we can apply towards our last year's, and that's a pretty significant cash savings that can come through the government to WEF to help benefit our programs. And that was made available to us through our audit firm that made us aware of that, and it's kind of an ongoing program that we're pursuing currently. As of course you know, we had an online WEF Tech Connect last year. We were a little unsure how to budget for that, but we did exceed our revenue budgets for that last year. And then more importantly, just here last month, we received word that our pretty large insurance proceeds came in from last year's WEF Tech to kind of mitigate any potential loss we would have had. So that was a significant event for us. A lot of time commitment from not only our WEF financial staff, but also Stephanie Jones and the staff in the convention area spent a lot of time for this. And so really, because of our insurance proceeds that we had last year, because of some of the benefit from the PPP loan and what we're going to receive on the employee retention credit, and also some major growth that we've had in our investments. Over the last 3 or 4 years, we changed our policy for our reserves, and we've invested those, and we've had some good growth there. And so because of especially those 3 areas and the work of staff, we came in much better than we anticipated for last year, even though we were entered the year with much trepidation going forward. So go ahead, Kelsey, to the next one. So again, looking forward more towards FY22, it may not be quite as rosy a picture as it was in 21 from a financial standpoint. But we want to make sure that we're funding the programs that are needed. And so that's the thing that I kind of want to concentrate here a little bit. It's not just the finances, but it's making sure that we're providing the programs that our membership, that our HOD and the MAs are interested in. And that's the importance of having your budget committee chair and vice chair on our finance committee. A couple things that Lynn mentioned going forward, we've got this big initiative for updating our strategic plan. We'll be funding that significantly through this next year. We've got continued investment in our DE&I, not just internally, but through our consultant, so that we can hopefully spread that out more into the MAs and into other areas. So please look for that. We're funding an update to the WEF website this year. Hopefully that'll be much cleaner and more accessible to everyone. And the Finance Committee recommended and the board approved restarting the MA grant program again for next year. So we've got 100,000 committed to that. We've put that into the kind of targeted your budget committee to determine how that money is allocated throughout the year. So we're very happy that we can do that again for this next year here. One of the things though to consider is that we're continuing to fund these things, but we need to make sure that we're doing it in the right manner. Next slide, Kelsey. Just wanted to comment to you again on how efficiently I think WEF is run. We compare ourselves to other nonprofits to make sure that we're in line, and we've got a very low overhead and very little debt compared to other programs out there, and are really maintaining a well-run operation. Next slide. So I'm not going to talk about these, just wanted to highlight again the programs that we're doing. One, that we're supporting the DE&I effort. Walt might talk about it, but he's in a CEO action group for this as well. Next slide. Another area is our support for our MAs. We talked about the grant program, but there's a number of other things out there. Your WEF maxes are going to be a little bit different this year as well, but we want to make sure that we keep that emphasis down to the MAs, kind of the bread and butter of our organization. Next slide. And then, of course, we need to support our conferences and our educational events, really something that WEF has been known for. Hope to see you all in a week and a half in Chicago. We're hopefully on track to have a great attendance there. Obviously, has a big impact on our budget, but also in our networking and the educational levels that we have. And as Lynn talked about, the WEF 365 is really kind of our efforts to provide this education fully throughout the year, not just at one-time events. Next slide. So looking ahead, we have budgeted all of our conferences is being in person this year. And hopefully that will be the case. We do have a utility manager conference coming up in the first of the year, right there. And we're funding the strategic plan, which has already started and is underway. One thing you might not be aware of, but this year is the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. That really started a lot of efforts here in the US, especially with EPA and the grant program and things. So WEF staff is going to be working on some strategic communication activities throughout the year. Kind of be looking for those. We provided some funding for those. May even be some video games that apply towards the water sector, because we don't want to just address our membership alone. We want to try to draw more people into the water sector and the public in general. And so that's kind of the efforts there. And then our continued investment in our online learning, not just internal staffing, but some consultant help that we can use to help get that word out. So in this effort going forward, we are looking or anticipating a deficit spending for this year. We felt that it was important that we continue to provide the programs that are needed. And so we are planning to dip into our reserves. They have been built up over the last several years so that in a case like we have now, we can continue those services. So it's important that we obviously use those the best we can and efficiently as we can. But we do want to make sure that to understand that we're on, sound financial standing right now, and that we can do that to provide services going forward. Just want to also add that our investments, we've set up an investment policy. So that's been good. That's allowed us to kind of increase some of our programs that we have out there. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Lynn, and I'm certainly open to questions later if you need to.
And actually, I was just going to put, so I received a question directly about who purchased the NGICP program. So I just wanted to share that with the group, because I think there might be other people with the same question.
Yeah, thank you, Kelsey. And I'm hoping that I'm banging my head to remember their name, but Walt, I presume, will be on the tip of his tongue and can include that in his remarks. So let me hand it over to Walt and hand that question over to you as well.
Oh no, I may be in trouble and not remembering off the top of my head. Maybe Barry or somebody else is on the call today.
I don't think he is. I just remember that their business is certifications. That's what they do. And they were very excited to, and we are continuing to be a partner with them, but we're just not running. Claudio, maybe you can weigh in.
Yes, I can help. EnviroCert is an organization that is running this. It's one of their flagship programs now. They actually are in the process of getting re-upped by their ANSI standard. So they will be able to continue the high level of service that the NGICP provides. They have a number of other certifications. They are in the certification business, both in the US and abroad. And they have intentions to extend the NGICP internationally as well. And they're already producing new materials, and they're in partnership with us to do that. Some of the contents that are going to go into the training is going to come from WEF. And also some potential royalties down the line may come to WEF as well, including income from training aspects of it, which is really what we are all about. So it has found a great home in its process of growing.
Thank you, Claudio. I'm going to turn over to Walt. We are running a little bit behind, but I think we'll probably be able to make up for that time in the rest of it. So I'm not too worried. I think this is important. Walt, it's over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Keith and you gave so much good information. I could be really short today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Keith. That was wonderful.
Well, anyway, thanks everybody. You know, today's really the kickoff of WEF Tech with this meeting, right? And we've also had several internal ones today that have really gotten the staff going on WEF Tech already. So it's like a 2-week process, 3-week process for WEF Tech. And the board will be meeting next Thursday. That's only a week away. So the excitement and also the anxiety is really increasing. But I'm very, very pleased how the event's setting up this year and the great experience that I expect everybody to have while in Chicago. So, I know everybody's always interested in our registration numbers. So I just want to let everybody know that we're pretty much looking at a WEF Tech 21 that's about 50% the size of a pre-pandemic WEF Tech. And I know you hear 50%, but that's a really, really big event, right? It is the first chance that we're going to have to come together as the water community as a whole. And I know everybody's going to really have a great experience. We're going to have 10,000 people there. We have hundreds of exhibitors in the exhibit hall. We have hundreds of education opportunities, much more collaborative learning this year, some really great networking opportunities despite some of the restrictions that the pandemic puts in front of us. But everyone who's going to be there is going to really have a great time and come away with a lot of value. And then as Lynn mentioned, if you can't make it to Chicago this year, please tune into WEF Tech Live during the event. And then, if you need to get your professional development hours, continuing education, sign up for WEF Tech online in November. So I'll get back to kind of the staff perspective on what's going on here. At the highest level, what we do and what's a priority, it's really about pursuing the WEF mission and making sure that we're providing value for all our members and customers who make up our amazing community of water professionals. As Lynn mentioned, my role is to work with the board to help establish the organization's mission, goals, strategies. I think it's been a really good self-transformation by the board that began probably, I know it began prior to my arrival, to really understand their role in leading and governing the organization on behalf of the membership and not, spending as much time with the management of the organization. Managing has its challenges, but sometimes that can be easier. It's easier to get your arms around that than actually blue skying and leading and trying to see where the industry in the future is going. That's pretty tough. So the priorities coming from the board, they represent input from a lot of members and diverse interests. I think it's really important to remember that WEF's not a monarchy. As much as I love working with Lynn, it's not about following the year-to-year variations of the WEF presidents, but it's more, a representative government via the input of the House, of the CLC, the board. So my biggest function is really to take those board priorities and ensure that we have the organizational structure, the resource allocation, and the staff to effectively contribute to achieving those priorities with the member volunteers who are absolutely critical to achieving progress. Associations are pretty unique because the members are the owners of the company. They're the workforce in so many ways, and they're also the customer that consumes all the products. So very, very interesting dynamic. Now, Lynn mentioned at the beginning of her presentation, the elephant. I love that because WEF is just so much going on, even a lot of days, as you could see by my answer on who bought our NGICP program. It's just so hard to keep track of everybody. It really takes everybody on the whole. And then when I give a report like this, I default a lot of times to talking about an iceberg, right? Because what you're going to hear from me, and you heard from Lynn and Keith, is maybe 10% of what's going on around WEF at that visible portion of the iceberg. Meanwhile, 90% of it, we're not talking about. It's still going on. Members are working hard, contributing to things. There's certain programs we do year after year that deliver a lot of value, but because they're not new, we don't necessarily talk about them. So I want to give an apology to everyone right away on the couple of things that I'm going to talk about, because I'm probably missing 90% of the cool things that are going on with WEF. Both Lynn and Keith talked about strategic planning. The board began the process in this summer, and you may hear the name through, and that's the consulting firm that's working with us. Our goal is to have a new plan adopted next summer by the board, and then really be pushing it a lot at WEF Tech in 22. We're currently in the assessment phase. We're doing member and stakeholder surveys, interviews, focus groups, some market research. Some of you may already have participated in some of this. Some of you may be getting info over the next couple of months, but just keep looking for updates in all our communication channels. And, just saying communications channels, it's a great way to transition to say communications right now is really, really a big priority with the board and also with staff, and a couple of different perspectives here. One, I don't think any of us have experienced a time when the importance of clean water and sanitation services has been more magnified than during the current pandemic, and with the specter of climate change impacting water quality and availability. This year, just imagine trying to deliver healthcare without clean water and sanitation. Imagine how it would feel to come home or running a manufacturing operation with no functioning water supply or sanitation services if our water workforce wasn't showing up each day during the pandemic. So the impact on our communities and the economy would be catastrophic. Also, the extreme droughts, being experienced in the Western US and other parts of the world are really focusing our industry. And I think we have a great opportunity aligned with a new crop of community leaders and activists to really pitch the importance of water and talk about the critical issues we need to deal with in addressing water quality and supply. So I think it really makes an opportune time to communicate how to participate in, support, and benefit from WEF. And we want to get that member out on all our members' successes, our partners' solutions that they bring to the issues, and then also on WEF products and services to really demonstrate how WEF can make a difference in the communities we live and serve. Plus, I forget if it was Lynn or Keith, or maybe both of them said, we need to make it easier to find things that are of interest to individuals as they want to interact with WEF. That's critical to us. So our 22 budget, shows an increase in the resources devoted to our communication areas. We have a number of initiatives, including, looking at expanding staff resources in this area, a refreshed main website. We have more material in our biosolids outreach program. We're looking at an innovative water-themed game for mobile and gaming platforms to help raise public awareness. We're exploring a second film to follow Brave Blue World. And we're looking at continuing to enhance our Water Worth It campaign and also our Work for Water online resources. And, we're also looking at building better internal communications via our member engagement project, which was mentioned. We want members, to have a much easier time interacting with the organization, improve the transparency of information, and let members engage, when they want to find exactly what's relevant to them with ease. Lynn mentioned our desire to have year-round programming. So many people identify WEF Tech as WEF, and that's okay because it's an amazing flagship product, but we want to make sure that they know they can engage throughout the year. At the board level, we call this our WEF 365 project, but we want to provide continuous touch points, continuous value to people. We also talked about DE&I, big issue. We want to make sure that the organization, is diverse, it's welcoming. We want to make sure it recognizes and celebrates our unique differences so that WEF really represents the people that are in the profession and the communities that we serve. So there is going to be a joint CLC HOD workshop on DE&I a week from Saturday in Chicago. And then you can go to the WEF Tech website to see a much wider slate of DE&I activities that are going on there. Maybe the last area that I'll touch on is public health. WEF's roots and our mission are founded on the concept of protecting public health. I think over the last year, we tried to do the best job we could with making information available to the public and our members on coronavirus issues around wastewater. We had our blue ribbon panel that was led by Dr. Art Umbel, which came out with a wonderful report that's been picked up by other organizations. We also hired a chief medical officer, Dr. Andrew Sanderson, who's been a wonderful resource, both for the blue ribbon panel, for some of our technical committees, and as a speaker to bring some of the information that our members are maybe not first line experts like the medical profession is, but to bring that perspective and really improve our own products as a result of it. Dr. Sanderson's also helped cultivate some of the new relationships we have with the CDC and some of the projects with EPA, especially around wastewater surveillance, where we have some demonstration projects that are going to be expanded over the next year, and are also continuing with us running our National Wastewater Surveillance Group for the CDC. And some of that will culminate with a conference in March of 2020 in Cincinnati, our first public health and water conference, plus wastewater surveillance summit. So a lot of things going on. I always feel like if I don't talk about, each one of our committees under the CLC, I feel like I'm disrespecting so much of the work that our members are bringing to the table, all their contributions to the WEF Tech program, the magazine, our journal, all kinds of things going on. So, but I could talk all afternoon. So I think that's about all I'll get in today, Len. So maybe I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Walt. And at this point, I've really appreciated the input from Walt and Keith, and I got to say, I kind of like this format for doing this, as opposed to being in the big conference room with being where I can't really see the slides and all that sort of thing. So I think maybe our transition to getting more skilled at online meetings has some upsides to it as well. And I think that there are probably many more people that can come to this than if we were holding it in person. So thanks to everybody for being here. At this point, I would like to close the annual membership business meeting